The shuttle touched down with the kind of elegance only a diplomatic craft could afford. Smooth, slow, and utterly unimpressed with the rocky surface of Villanine inside. Theo Maddox wiped his palms on his pants for the 5th time, pretending not to notice the way the interior lights subtly changed color in response to his pulse. Somewhere above his head, the translation AI Hallie whispered, "Please regulate emotional output. You're making the sensors itchy." Theo inhaled, adjusted the diplomatic sash he still didn't understand the purpose of, and stepped into the blinding gold atmosphere of the alien planet. Villanine looked like someone had taken a fantasy novel, a lava lamp, and a deep space geological survey and tossed them in a blender. Towering mineral spires shimmered with magnetic dust. The sky pulsed in layered hues of violet and bronze, and everything smelled faintly of roasted almonds and ozone. He was greeted by a welcoming committee that looked like they'd stepped off the set of Space Hamlet, regal, armored, and taller than him by at least a head. Each Valerian held themselves with a grace Theo had only seen in cats and nightmare-inducing ballet instructors. And then there was her. Lyra stood slightly apart, wearing matte black armor with veins of something pulsing through it. Theo assumed it was either ceremonial energy or mood lighting. Her eyes were silver, cold, unreadable. Her skin looked human, save for the sheen of fine particles embedded like constellations beneath the surface. But it was her ears long, sloped elegantly back, like someone had carved crescents from polished stone that really sold the alien thing. She did not blink. Theo cleared his throat. Greetings on behalf of the United Earth Federated States. I come in peace, although my stomach packed a few diplomatic snacks just in case." No reaction. He smiled weakly. "I'm Theo Maddox, linguist, diplomatic cultural bridge. Sometimes reluctant karaoke participant." Still nothing. Lyra inclined her head a fraction, which Hallie interpreted with a ping. Acknowledgement received. "She finds you visually fantastic," Theo muttered. "That's how I always want to be described on dates and job interviews." A formal procession led him into a crystalline structure that, despite looking like an intergalactic ice sculpture, somehow maintained a cozy room temperature. Theo tried not to gawk as living panels adjusted their shape to his body heat, creating subtle nooks of privacy and perfectly timed ventilation. It was like walking inside a spa staffed by psychics. Lyra, apparently his designated bodyguard and liaison, said nothing during the first hour of negotiations. She stood beside him like a particularly elegant statue with built-in death capabilities. Every time Theo reached for his translator cuff, she narrowed her eyes just a twitch, but he felt like she was assessing the tensile strength of his bones. The Valerian Council was composed of 7 elders, each more ornamented than the last, who spoke in overlapping tones that Hallie scrambled to untangle. The negotiations were dense, formal, and let's be honest, maddeningly slow. Midway through a particularly confusing clause about alliance rights and mutually agreed interspecies breeding protocols, which Theo hoped was metaphorical, he leaned toward Lyra and whispered, "Okay, but if I mess up again, I'll just marry you and claim sanctuary. Sound fair?" He grinned. A joke, a good one. Probably a 7 out of 10, if he was grading on nervous energy. Lyra turned. Her gaze didn't flicker, didn't soften. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear. "I accept." Theo blinked. "Wait, what?" "I accept your proposal of union," she said, as if confirming a coffee order. "We are now bonded under Valerian Right 3, subsection Honor Blood." One of the council members let out a pleased chirrup. Another stood and clapped once ceremonially. Hallie chimed in. "Congratulations. You are now recognized as a bonded mate by Valerian law. Shared benefits include joint citizenship, access to warrior archives, and ceremonial burial rights. Please update your will." Theo's brain made a noise like a dial-up modem from the 1990s. No, wait, that was a joke. I wasn't serious," he hissed. Lyra tilted her head. "Your thermal signature suggested sincerity. Your gaze was steady. You did not avert your eyes. These are the traits of a Valerian vow. Well, on Earth, these are the traits of someone trying not to pass out from embarrassment." The council seemed pleased. A few murmured about symbolic unity and strategic fertility. Someone presented him with a ceremonial blade etched with his and Lyra's biometrics. Theo accepted it because he didn't want to be rude. "So," he said, heart pounding, mouth dry, "does this come with a prenup or just immediate space?" "Taxes." Lyra didn't answer. She merely stepped closer within breath range. Theo noticed she smelled like cool metal and something like wild mint. She spoke softly. "I will protect you." Theo nodded. "Numb. That's good. I'm very protectable." The rest of the evening passed in a kaleidoscope of ritual, gestures, biometric scanning, and an uncomfortable moment where Theo had to stand on a levitating disc while a Valerian elder sang at his blood. By nightfall, he was exhausted, confused, and sharing a quarters suite with Lyra, who calmly laid out her weapons beside the bed and asked if he snored. Only when dreaming of commitment, he muttered. She didn't laugh. Theo lay there in the dim golden light, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what exactly had happened. Hallie blinked into view from the corner, projecting a tiny hologram of a wedding certificate in Valerian script on the plus side. The AI whispered, "Her clan has excellent dental coverage." Theo groaned. He had come to Villanine to bridge cultures. Instead, he'd accidentally married a warrior princess with the emotional expression of a sentient obsidian blade, and somewhere, deep inside, a part of him he usually kept distracted with bad puns and iced coffee whispered, "What if this isn't a mistake? What if this is exactly what you needed to shake your orbit?" He told that part to shut up, but it did in single quotes t. Theo woke to the unmistakable sound of metal being sharpened against stone. It had a rhythm to its low, deliberate, not aggressive exactly, but just threatening enough to discourage sleeping in. He cracked one eye open. Lyra was seated cross-legged on the floor, a long curved blade resting across her lap, its edge catching the amber light filtering through the crystalline window panes. Her armor was gone, replaced by some kind of soft, ceremonial wrap that looked like it had been designed by a fashion-conscious warlock. Her long ears twitched faintly, as if catching sounds from a dimension he wasn't invited to. "Morning," Theo said, voice gravelly, "or whatever unit of time we're pretending is morning on this planet." Lyra didn't look up. "It is the cycle of rekindling. Light returns. Cool, so like a Valerian brunch hour. Got it." He rubbed his face and sat up, wincing at the stiffness in his neck. The bed was deceptively soft, like sleeping on a hug from someone you didn't fully trust. A small orb hovered into the room and chirped at him. It projected a list of obligations in midair: blood oath renewal, nutrient harmony feast, bond confirmation, ritual optional but strongly encouraged. Theo squinted. "What is a nutrient harmony feast, and do I need to wear a tie?" Lyra paused, her blade sharpening. "It is a ceremonial breakfast where we consume our preferred proteins while discussing the moral weight of union." "Right, so, like eggs and couples therapy," she frowned, which on her face looked like someone moved 2 pixels in the wrong direction. Theo rose and padded toward the console near the door, still marveling at how every surface responded to proximity: smooth crystal shifting to become textured grips, drawers unfolding like polite origami. He reached for the interface. Hallie's voice, still smug from last night, whispered from the wall, "Would you like a bonding meal recommendation? Valerian custom suggests sharing something gelatinous." "Hard pass," he muttered. Lyra stood. She moved with the same casual menace of a jungle cat that had taken yoga classes. "You must eat. Ceremony requires clarity of thought and minimal trembling. I only tremble during tax season." They made their way through the grand hall, accompanied by floating drones broadcasting soft harmonics. Other Valerians watched them with a mixture of reverence and concern. Like Theo was a very well-dressed dog wearing glasses. At the feast table, various dishes blinked at him. One wobbled ominously and let out a soft hiss. Lyra stabbed it, nodded approvingly, and passed him a serving. "So, what exactly happens if I offend the food?" he asked. "It will attempt escape." I feel like Earth dating apps missed that feature. They ate. Or rather, Lyra consumed her meal with the grace of a monk performing ritual. Theo poked at his with the cautious diplomacy of someone handling alien sushi prepared by a philosopher. Between bites, Lyra spoke. "You are not what I expected. I get that a lot. I studied human diplomats before your arrival. They often avoid sincerity. While it's a cultural thing, sincerity is scary. We mostly communicate in sarcasm and passive-aggressive birthday cards." She tilted her head, considering. "Then your proposal, was it a test?" Theo froze with a piece of something translucent halfway to his mouth. "No, I mean yes. I didn't think it would count." Lyra watched him for a moment, then looked away. "Valerians do not test with words, only with blade or mind." "Right, I've noticed that sarcasm doesn't quite land here. You are difficult to read. But you do not lie with your eyes." Theo swallowed hard, unsure if that was romantic or vaguely threatening. Probably both. The rest of the morning involved a guided tour of Valerian cultural institutions. They visited the Hall of Echoing Promises, an acoustically engineered chamber where couples whispered their intentions, and the walls remembered them. Theo, trying to keep things light, said, "I promise not to leave the toilet seat up." The chamber repeated it in an eternal loop with disturbing reverence. Next was the Bond Archives, where ancient unions were recorded in crystal. Each couple's history glowed within a translucent cube, showing key moments in animated silhouettes. Lyra touched a panel and her own lineage appeared: generations of warriors, bonded not by accident but by feats of strength, strategy, or shared visions during psionic storms. Theo's cube was blank. He tapped it. Nothing happened. Hallie helpfully explained. "Your bonding was registered posthumously after a joke. The archive is unsure how to interpret this data." Lyra didn't laugh, but her ears twitched again as the sun's cycle ended. They returned to their quarters. Theo slumped on the edge of the bed, exhausted by ceremonial interpretation, empathic architecture, and the general feeling of being someone's weird intercultural experiment. "Okay," he said, rubbing his temples. "Let's talk, Warrior 2, whatever I am." Lyra sat beside him. "I wasn't mocking you. I just unearthed. We use humor to manage anxiety. It's like a pressure valve. Sometimes we joke about serious things because they matter." I understand," she said softly. I have observed your species laugh when overwhelmed. You call it losing it. It is inefficient but oddly effective. Theo turned to her. And I get that you take words seriously. I'm just asking. Can we figure this out without a tribunal or an accidental blood duel? Lyra hesitated. Then, in a voice that might have passed for gentle, would you prefer to nullify the bond? He didn't answer right away. Instead he looked at Horelli, looked at a strange stillness in her, the strength hidden behind restraint, the quiet weight of expectation she wore. Like a second skin. No, he said. I don't want to break it. I just want to understand it first. For a second, just a flicker, something shifted in her expression. Then we begin tomorrow, she said, with the dowry. Wait, there's a dowry. Yes, you must receive the items of union. Theo sighed. Let me guess. One of them's alive. Lyra nodded. Very. Theo flopped back onto the bed, arms spread. Space marriage is so much more complicated than Earth Tinder. From the corner, Hallie added dryly, at least this one comes with health coverage. And a free plasma spear. He groaned on tomorrow. Apparently he was getting married again, officially, possibly to a plasma spear. The dowry arrived in 3 separate hover crates, each humming ominously as they floated into Theo's quarters at dawn. One of them pulsed faintly with a soft blue glow. Another made a squelching sound whenever someone got too close. The third simply hissed once, when touched, and then went very, very still. Theo stared at them with a towel over his shoulder, hair still damp from his awkwardly powerful sonic shower. Why do I feel like one of these is going to be my new roommate? Lyra didn't look away from her datapad because one of them as a soft chirp came from the blue glowing crate. It wobbled, rose a few centimeters higher, then gently tilted toward Theo. See, he said, pointing. That's a crate with emotional needs. It is Gronk, Lyra replied flatly. It has already chosen you. Theo's. I twitched. That's a name. It named itself after sensing your neural resonance. It responded most to your subconscious transmission of the word ugh. Gronk approximates this. The crate popped open with a quiet hiss, releasing a puff of lavender mist and something that resembled a sentient stress ball with stubby pseudopods and 2 large blinking eyes. It slurped forward, squeaked in excitement, and promptly launched itself onto Theo's chest. He staggered back. Okay, WOW, hello. Yes, I see you. You're very present. The blob purred like a gelatinous kitten and pulsed in rhythm with Theo's heartbeat. It has bonded, Lyra said simply. It is now part of the dowry. You will feed it thoughts. Theo's face twisted. I'm sorry, did you just say? Feed it thoughts, positive emotions. It thrives on those. Negative ones cause it to replicate unpleasant sounds. As if on cue, the blob emitted a near-perfect imitation of Theo's earlier groan. Gronk, Theo muttered, gently prying it off his chest. You're lucky you're cute. The second crate opened to reveal a memory crystal the size of a football, etched with swirling inscriptions. Lyra lifted it reverently and placed it between them. This contains the history of my lineage. Battle cries, visions, dreams, our code. The crystal lit up with a soft chime, projecting a scene in shimmering light. A younger Lyra, fierce and bloodied, standing alone against a phalanx of armored figures twice her size. She did not retreat. Theo whistled. So, your family history is basically a sci-fi action trilogy. Lyra didn't smile, but her eyes warmed slightly. We are known for endurance. Theo watched as more images appeared, generations of her kin standing vigil, fighting beside allies, training in solitude. But at the end, the crystal showed Lyra alone, walking away from her clan, carrying a staff instead of a blade. He glanced at her. Exile choice, she said quietly. They wished to fight. I wished to change. Theo nodded, surprised by the sudden ache in his chest. Yeah, families can be great at misunderstanding what matters. The third crate opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a sleek, handcrafted plasma pike with Theo's name already engraved along the shaft in Valerian script. He picked it up. It was oddly light, perfectly balanced, and radiated a soft hum, as if it was trying to introduce itself. Am I supposed to know how to use this? He asked. It is biometrically linked to your nerve field, Lyra explained. You will intuit its use. Theo gave it a cautious swing. It responded with an elegant arc of light and a sharp whoosh, slicing the edge of a decorative curtain clean off. Okay, that's not terrifying at all. From the corner, Hallie chimed in. Note, accidental activation of plasma weapons inside. Living quarters will void your damage deposit. The rest of the day passed in preparation for the formal dowry exchange ceremony. Apparently, they weren't done until Theo had presented her with something in return, something that represented his essence. He panicked for 3 solid hours. You want me to give you what, my Netflix password? A mixtape? He asked, pacing. I didn't bring any heirlooms. The most valuable thing I own is a limited edition Xeno ramen mug that changes color with heat. Lyra raised an eyebrow. Then offer me something you value that no one else does. That stopped him. Cold. He thought for a long time. Then he disappeared into his travel pack, rummaged, and returned with a worn folded piece of paper. He held it out silently. Lyra took it, unfolded it carefully. On the page was a messy drawing in crayon, childish, bright, featuring a stick figure version of Theo holding hands with an older woman and standing next to a rocket ship. "My mom made me promise I'd keep that," he said softly. "Drew it for me when I was 6. Said it was proof I could go anywhere and still belong somewhere." Lyra looked at the paper for a long time. Then, without a word, she folded it with care and tucked it into the lining of her tunic. They stood like that, not speaking, while Gronk made soft purring sounds and absorbed the shared emotion like ambient soup. The ceremony that evening was blessedly short. A few ritual chants, a symbolic handshake involving psionic feedback which tingled like champagne in the brain, and the official declaration by the council that their bond had now moved from initial union to culturally enshrined. Theo celebrated by drinking something that looked like melted sapphires and tasted like memories of recess. Afterwards, as they walked back to their quarters beneath the twin moons, he said, "So, how many steps are left before we can call this a normal marriage?" Lyra considered. 5 more rites, 6 trials, 1 potential war. Theo blinked. Was that sarcasm? She almost smiled. Possibly. Gronk chirped in agreement, then burped out a perfect imitation of Theo saying, "I didn't sign up for this." Theo laughed. Maybe he hadn't signed up for it, but it was starting to feel like the kind of mistake he'd want to keep making. Theo regretted everything the moment the first camera drone entered their living quarters and said, in an unsettlingly cheerful voice, "Smile, newlyweds. The galaxy is watching." Hallie chirped from the ceiling, far too amused. "I attempted to block the media request, but unfortunately your marital status triggered Clause 9F of the Interstellar Curiosity Accord. You're now legally considered culturally fascinating." Lyra, seated at the small meditation table, didn't blink. "Is this the reality archive Earth favors?" "It's not ours," Theo muttered, yanking a half-sipped jacket over his shirt. "We gave up reality years ago. Now it's mostly performance art with ad breaks." The drone spun, scanned their vitals, and projected a holographic title in the air. "Love Across Light Years, Episode 1, Accidental Vows. Intentional Hearts." Theo groaned. "We sound like an interspecies soap opera." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Is this another Earth ritual? Only if your ritual involves mass embarrassment and sponsors." The drone chirped. "We are now live across 3 systems. Please describe your current emotional state using only color metaphors." "I'm feeling very chartreuse," Theo snapped. The drone hummed. Intriguing interpretation, hopeful panic with undertones of digestive confusion. Later, once the crew had extracted enough footage of Theo attempting to explain the Earth concept of sarcasm using Gronk as a prop, he found himself navigating another minefield. Lyra's extended family. They arrived via transmatter gate, materializing into the courtyard in synchronized silence. 10 warriors clad in veined armor, standing like they'd stepped out of a myth. They bowed to Lyra, then they stared at Theo. He waved. "Hi, I'm the joke that stuck." One of them stepped forward, tall, grim, and wearing a gauntlet that hummed faintly with plasma or the bond. Theo cleared his throat. "The accidental bond. Yes, technically I was kidding. Legally, I am not." Another warrior tilted her head. "He smells uncertain." "That's just fear sweat," Theo offered. "It's a common Earth secretion." A third warrior approached, reaching into her belt pouch. She produced a small, glowing orb and handed it to Theo. "This is the orb of clarification. Hold it while speaking truth." He accepted it. It warmed instantly. "Okay, truth. I'm trying. I didn't expect this. I'm overwhelmed. But I'm also impressed and possibly in mild shock." The orb flickered pink. The warriors exchanged glances. One nodded solemnly. "He is sincere. Inadequate, but sincere." "The story of my life," Theo muttered. Later that evening, the formal meal began. A floating table assembled itself mid-air, and the family gathered around it in silence. Each dish came with a declaration, purpose of nourishment, symbolic intent, potential emotional side effects. One platter released pheromones designed to promote clarity in long-term relationships. Theo sneezed violently and hallucinated his 5th-grade teacher, apologizing for calling him easily distracted. Lyra whispered, "Do not eat the clarity roots unless you're prepared for emotional transparency." Theo nudged them away. "I'm barely prepared for daylight." Halfway through the meal, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Wow, you really did get married to a space elf." Theo turned to see Stella, his ex-girlfriend, now apparently an invited scientific observer, striding into the courtyard in full xenobotanist regalia. "Stella," she grinned. "Saw your name pop up in the interstellar gossip feeds. Thought I'd swing by and see the legendary cross-cultural mess for myself." Theo stood awkwardly. "This is not what it looks like." "Oh, I know exactly what it looks like. You panicked committed during a diplomatic incident." Classic Theo. Lyra stood, slowly. "You are a former bond." Stella raised an eyebrow. "I'm a scientist. Former emotional entanglement. Nothing legally binding." Lyra nodded. "You are not a threat." Stella blinked. "I wasn't trying to be." "Good," Lyra said simply. "Because I would win." Theo coughed. "Okay, let's all just appreciate the fact that no one here wants an actual fight." Stella rolled her eyes. Relax, I didn't come to reclaim anything. Just wanted to observe the strange phenomenon of Theo accidentally stumbling into something meaningful. Theo sighed. It's becoming a theme. That night, as the courtyard lights dimmed and the warriors departed in respectful silence, Theo sat beside Lyra on the rooftop balcony. Gronk slurped onto his lap, pulsing contentedly. I'm starting to think maybe I needed something to crash into, Theo murmured. Lyra tilted her head. You believe the crash was your choice? He shrugged. Maybe not the impact, but what I do after. She looked out at the twin moons, their light painting her silver eyes in shades of something softer. Valerian belief says that unions are forged not from intent, but from response. He smiled. Then maybe I'm finally learning to respond with more than panic and one-liners, Gronk chirped, then mimicked Theo's earlier voice. I'm overwhelmed but impressed. Theo snorted. Yeah, that about sums it up. Lyra leaned just slightly closer. You are adapting. He leaned back. Don't tell anyone. It might ruin my brand. Theo was trying to have a normal day. His version of normal now involved psychically bonding with a sentient blob named Gronk, fielding emotionally loaded stares from passing Valerian elders, and navigating marriage counseling, conducted via tactical combat simulations. Still, there was something comforting in the pattern of strangeness. Until the tribunal called Hallie interrupted his morning nutrient tea with the holographic equivalent of a sigh. You've been summoned to the Valerian High Tribunal for a bond inquiry. Emotional inconsistencies have been flagged. Theo stared into his mug. Is this about the thing with the pepper sauce? I said I didn't know it caused hallucinations. Hallie made a flat tone. This is about your recent statements during your documentary confessionals, specifically. Your use of the phrase, we're just figuring things out. Theo blinked. That triggered a formal investigation. Lyra stepped into the room mid-conversation, tightening a clasp on her tunic. On Villanine, uncertainty in bonded speech is considered a breach of clarity. It implies the bond lacks mutual trajectory. Theo stood. Wait, this isn't a reality show recap. They think I'm trying to opt out. They think you are not committed, Lyra said. The tribunal requires proof. Theo hesitated. Proof like what? A joint savings account, coordinated outfits. Lyra handed him a ceremonial sash. Proof of resonance. They arrived at the tribunal chamber, a vast, echoing space filled with floating glass panels, each showing shifting images of the couple's public interactions. Theo winced at one particularly unflattering moment where he was trying to teach Lyra how to wink and accidentally sneezed on her instead. The council elder floated forward. No legs, just robes and a face that looked like a disappointed nebula. Theo Maddox of Earth, your bond stands at 63% integration. Please explain your use of vague language. Theo cleared his throat. Look, on Earth, it's normal to be figuring things out. We don't always know the ending at the beginning. Sometimes we take our time. That doesn't mean I'm not serious. It just means I'm human. The elder blinked horizontally. Uncertainty is not a recognized emotional category on Villanine. Lyra stepped forward. He processes clarity through chaos. His method is unfamiliar, but not invalid. Another panel flickered to life. It showed Theo, arms flailing, yelling, I need a minute. During a cultural dance where the floor had temporarily liquefied, Theo groaned. That was not a metaphor. The tiles turned into jelly. The elder gestured toward Lyra. Do you wish to maintain this bond, despite statistical indicators? I do, she said. He is confusing, but my blade has never learned from ease. There was a pause. The tribunal conferred through a network of glowing neural threads. Finally, the elder said, then you will undergo a clarifying trial. Theo raised a hand. I'd like to clarify that I don't like the sound of that. You will journey together to the mists of Hecarim, the elder intoned, where the landscape reveals emotional dissonance. You will not return unchanged. Gronk, from Theo's bag, let out a skeptical squeak. 2 hours later, they were dropped on the surface of a moon covered in pulsing fog and disorienting gravity shifts. The mist thickened the air, turning their breath into swirling trails of light. Theo tripped over a route that hadn't existed a second earlier. This place is alive. It reads your inner state, Lyra said, unsheathing her blade. It reacts accordingly. The ground beneath Theo's feet turned into soft sand, then suddenly into old carpet. He blinked. That's my grandmother's living room rug. A voice called from the fog, echoing in his own tone. You always joke to keep from asking what you really want. Theo froze. Did the fog just call me out? Lyra stepped closer. It is showing you your avoidance. Gronk oozed out of the pack, looked around, and projected Theo's old-school yearbook photo into the mist. The fog laughed. Theo sighed. I'm being emotionally audited by a haunted spa. They moved forward, deeper into the mist, each step forcing fragments of thought into view. For Lyra, the fog shaped into an image of her clan, watching her walk away. For Theo, it became a parade of what-ifs versions of himself that turned back instead of forward. At one point, they were surrounded by silhouettes of themselves in arguments. Lyra demanding answers, Theo deflecting with humor. Do you see? She said, this is your pattern. He looked around. Yeah, it's a lot. He took a breath. But not all of it's bad. I use jokes to survive things I don't know how to name. But I'm not joking about you. The silhouettes faded. The fog pulsed gently. Retreating Lyra lowered her blade. That was truth. Theo touched her hand. And this is me not running. They returned to the tribunal the next day. The council reviewed their neural scans. The elder nodded. Emotional resonance increased to 89%. Integration in progress. Theo slumped in relief. So, I passed the intergalactic feelings test. You responded, that is sufficient. Back in their quarters, Theo collapsed onto the sofa. Lyra sat beside him. Your mind is exhausting. Welcome to the human condition, he said. We're like high-speed collisions in slow motion. Gronk burbled, then projected a tiny heart emoji. Theo smiled. Still want to be married to this mess? Lyra considered, yes, but I will require regular meditation breaks. Fair. He leaned his head against her shoulder. So what happens now? She touched the sash he wore. Now we learn what it means to build rather than bond. From the ceiling, Hallie whispered. Also, your joint tax registration is overdue. Theo groaned, one emotional crisis at a time. Theo was halfway through explaining the rules of Unoath's most passive-aggressive card game when Lyra tilted her head and said, we should steal a ship. He blinked. You say that like you're suggesting a weekend hike. She pointed at the glowing notification that had just appeared on the wall. Interspousal convergence, retreat, mandatory participation in 5 rites of reflective unity. Theo squinted. Are they making us go on a couples retreat? On Villa 3 during blood rain season? He stared. That sounds like the setting of a horror documentary. Exactly. By the time Hallie finished listing the health risks of blood rain, mild skin erosion, hallucinations, spontaneous existential dread, they were already boarding a diplomatic skiff under the official pretense of field study. Gronk rode in Theo's lap, humming contentedly and emitting the occasional puff of empathy mist. Their destination was an abandoned observatory on the orbiting moon of Telvandros, once used for deep veil stellar mapping, now repurposed as a quarantine zone for couples in psychological overload. Lyra called it neutral ground. Theo called it exactly the kind of place where romance gets rebooted or obliterated. The moon's surface shimmered with glassy ridges and magnetic storms. As they landed, the skiff's interface warned them, atmospheric interference may result in temporary memory distortion. Avoid unresolved emotional content. Theo laughed. Oh, so just suppress our entire personalities. Easy. The observatory was intact, but flickering lights glitching, gravity slightly misaligned. Doors whispered open reluctantly. They were alone. For the first hour, it was peaceful. Lyra unpacked essentials with military precision. Theo discovered a vending unit that dispensed mood-appropriate snacks and spent 10 minutes arguing with it. Gronk found a corner and proceeded to bond with a heater coil. By nightfall, the observatory hummed with low energy fluctuations, and the memory distortion began. At first it was harmless. Theo walked into a room and found himself faced with himself wearing a lab coat and arguing passionately with an invisible board. Sorry, Pass, Theo said. The grant doesn't cover cross-species marriage counseling. Lyra appeared behind him, holding a malfunctioning psionic stabilizer. I found this plugged into an emotional filter. I think this place is projecting us, Theo said, watching another version of himself on a couch, nervously practicing a proposal to a plush toy, which, frankly, feels rude. The projections grew more intense as they explored. Some rooms showed arguments they'd never had. Others replayed fears they'd never voiced. One chamber presented Lyra standing alone, bloodied, watching a starship take off without her. She didn't speak. Theo reached out. That's not real. It is one of many reals, she said. One I once believed in. Another room showed Theo at a table, surrounded by versions of his past, his mother's disappointed silence, an old professor asking why he never finished his thesis, Stella looking bored. The real Lyra stepped beside him. You carry ghosts. He rubbed his face. Earth custom. We drag them everywhere like overpacked luggage. The observatory flickered again. Lights dimmed. A voice's voice spoke from the intercom. You're not meant for this. You make jokes because you don't know what else to offer. Theo leaned on a rail. This place is designed to unravel us. Only if there is no thread beneath, Lyra replied. They sat together in the main dome, stars rotating overhead through cracked lenses. I don't always know how to say serious things without making them weird, Theo admitted, like the words come out dressed in jokes because that's how I protect them. Lyra nodded, and I accept them as they arrive. But you must know your deflection is not invisible. Theo smiled. Good, I'd hate to think I was subtle. They were quiet for a while. Then Lyra said, what would you ask? If you trusted I would hear the question, not the joke. He didn't answer immediately. The dome buzzed softly. Gronk curled at their feet, glowing faintly. Theo finally said, do you think we'd still be here if I hadn't said it as a joke? Lyra looked at him. Yes, but I would not have said yes. That made him blink. Why? Because then, it would have been words. The joke carried truth past your own defenses. It was more honest than you knew. He let out a breath. So, the joke saved us. She touched his hand. It revealed you. Not the polished version, the accidental one, the one I believed. The observatory lights brightened slightly, the air warmed. Hallie pinged. Neural readings indicate significant decrease in internal resistance. Congratulations, your shared psychic field has stabilized. You may now safely initiate joint dreaming. Theo raised an eyebrow. That's a real thing. Fellery and marital retour. Conjoined lucid sleep. Lyra stood. Come, there is a chamber for this. I swear, your people invented new forms of intimacy just to confuse Earthmen. You are not confused. You are unarmored. They lay down in a circular sleep cradle, the room slowly rotating, projecting low gravity and ambient memory cues. As Theo drifted, he felt her presence beside him, not heavy, not demanding, just there. Gronk let out a satisfied gurgle and turned translucent, revealing a slow swirl of pink and violet inside. Theo whispered into the half-dream. Next time I make a joke, just remind me what it costs. Lyra, already half asleep, answered, only the truth you hide behind it. They slept, and for the first time, the observatory did not interrupt. They were still brushing sleep dust out of their eyes when the emergency broadcast flared to life. A bright red symbol pulsed across the observatory's main dome, intricate Valerian glyph that, according to Hallie, translated loosely to "So, that diplomacy thing, it's on fire." Theo blinked at the message. We were gone for 2 days. How much trouble can a planet get into in 2 days? Hallie projected a tactical map into the air. A rogue faction from the outer orbitals has declared that your interspecies union compromises Villanine's honor and sovereignty. You are officially classified as a cultural contaminant. Congratulations. Lyra tightened her belt and stepped into the flickering light. They mean to sever Villanine from the Federation. Our bond has become symbolic, Theo groaned. I knew symbolic. Love was a gateway drug to interstellar rebellion, Hallie buzzed. As of 37 minutes ago, the opposition issued a demand: dissolve the union or face corrective reclamation. Gronk let out a squeaky burble that sounded suspiciously like yikes. Theo looked around. All right, so we've accidentally become the face of a socio-political movement, and also maybe a war. Are we still on our honeymoon, or is this phase 2 of the Valerian bonding process? Lyra didn't answer immediately. She accessed a neural blade archive embedded in the observatory floor, retrieving a weapon that shimmered with reactive light. They will come for me, and for you, by extension. Unless we move first. Theo raised his hand. Just for the record, I'm allergic to most types of being come for. They boarded the skiff under stealth mode, slipping into orbit beneath the detection grid. Hallie rerouted through low-band diplomatic channels, transmitting non-aggressive ping signals as they glided toward Villanine's upper atmosphere. Theo looked at the swirling cloud layers of the planet below. So what's the plan? Just to show up with our marriage license and ask them nicely not to start an ideological war. Lyra adjusted the ship's vector. We go to the assembly. If we do not define our union ourselves, they will define it for us. Gronk squished onto the dash and projected an emoji that was either determined or deeply constipated. Hallie chirped. Arrival in 15 minutes. Warning, 2 orbital patrols have marked your transponder as irregular. Suggest you make your union more visually intimidating. Theo frowned. Do we have banners or matching armor? Something to scream, don't mess with us. We cuddle aggressively. Lyra reached into the side panel and pulled out a ceremonial cloak, dark as vacuum, stitched with her clan's seal. She handed it to Theo. It is woven with microfibered intimidation. Do I need to growl while wearing it? He asked. Slipping it on if it helps, she said. The skiff descended into the heart of the city-state, where the Valerian assembly hall floated above a sea of magnetic fields. The building pulsed with indigo light, its walls semi-transparent, showing flashes of figures inside, arguing, some calm, some panicked. One very large one attempting to eat a gavel. Theo stepped forward, cloaked, standing beside Lyra. The atmosphere shimmered as they entered the chamber. The murmur stopped. A counselor stood. You were summoned, not welcomed. Theo cleared his throat. Hi, nice to see you too. I brought snacks, also marriage. That's sort of the topic, right? Another counselor, older and draped in ceremonial cables, glared at them. You mock the rites. Your presence has fractured protocol. You turned union into parody. Lyra stepped forward. He did not mock, he misstepped, and I did not hesitate to meet him there. Theo nodded. Listen, I get it. I'm not traditional. I panic proposed with a joke and fell in love through misinterpretation. But here's the thing. Love is a language we're both still learning, and we're fluent in trying. A younger counselor frowned. Trying is not enough. You must exemplify. Hallie buzzed in Theo's ear. Initiating formal petition protocol. You must present evidence of transformative unity. Theo blinked. How do I do that? Show them my browser history. Lyra stepped beside him, and without warning, extended her hand. He took it. The chamber dimmed as they joined. Biofields triggered a feedback resonance, an unplanned side effect of their time in the mists of Heckering. A pulse of shared memory exploded outward, bathing the assembly in emotional telemetry. They saw flashes: Theo handing over the crayon drawing, Lyra whispering, I will protect you, Gronk belching a heart-shaped cloud after hearing Theo say, "I don't want to break it." The room was quiet when it ended. A moment later, someone sneezed. Another counselor coughed. That was highly unorthodox. The eldest stood, and yet, undeniable, there was a pause. Then, "The Union stands. Let no further protest question its truth." Theo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We're not contaminants." "You are precedent," the elder said. Theo looked at Lyra. "I think we just got promoted from married to symbolic diplomatic entity," she replied. "I preferred the part where we were alone on the observatory." "Same," he said. "No offense to nation building, but it's exhausting." Gronk chirped in agreement, then immediately sneezed on the council floor. Hallie pinged. "Congratulations. You are now classified as a stabilizing myth. Try not to ruin it." Theo groaned. "No pressure, right?" Lyra looked up at the stars pulsing beyond the translucent ceiling. "Let them watch. We know who we are." He took her hand. "Yeah, we do. Kind of terrifying, isn't it?" She smiled for real this time. "Only when it's honest." The wedding invitation came 3 weeks after the diplomatic summit ratified Villanine's full Federation status filed. Ironically, under personal event, low urgency, which Hallie took as a subtle insult. Theo stared at the glowing text, then blinked. "We're getting married." Again Lyra looked up from calibrating her blade, this time formally. With shared consent and mutual choreography, Theo raised an eyebrow. "Wait, there's dancing." "There is always dancing," she said, very seriously. "Possibly gravity inversions." Gronk, now wearing a tiny ceremonial sash of his own, burbled enthusiastically and tried to eat the invitation. They were standing in the shared quarters of their newly appointed diplomatic residence, a fusion of Valerian stone architecture and Earth comfort modules. It had windows that adjusted to mood and chairs that politely recalibrated to whatever emotional weight you were carrying. Theo had tested it by sitting down after a hard call with his mum, and the chair had offered him cocoa. Not metaphorically actual cocoa. Things had changed. The once Naval routines now had a rhythm. Lyra still sharpened her blades before breakfast, but now she did it while humming the Earth theme song from Inspector Timewatch, a show Theo had insisted was essential cultural research. Theo, meanwhile, had taken to practicing basic staff forms badly on the terrace, usually under the supervision of a small, critical Gronk who chirped disapprovingly every time he dropped the weapon. He dropped it a lot, but he no longer felt like he didn't belong. And maybe that was the point. The final ceremony took place not in a temple or council hall, but on the bridge of the very first Valerian Earth joint exploration vessel, still in dry dock, still experimental, and currently hovering 3 feet off the ground because someone had triggered the antigrav by leaning on the control panel. "I didn't touch anything," Theo insisted, floating sideways in his formal tunic. "You breathed near it," Hallie noted, "which, for you, is usually enough." The ship named Concordia by unanimous vote, then renamed Slightly Married by Theo as a joke, then renamed back after Lyra's glare short-circuited a console was chosen for symbolic reasons. New paths, shared journeys, a literal launch point. The guest list included council members, a delegation from Earth, 3 of Lyra's cousins, all of whom still referred to Theo as the soft one, and one very bored stellar archivist who kept muttering about this being psychologically relevant but culturally inefficient. Stella showed up too. She wore a sleek diplomatic uniform and brought Theo a piece, lily-grown in a zero-gravity greenhouse. "It thrives in inconsistent environments," she said with a smirk. "Like you." Theo grinned. "Nice to see you didn't try to duel anyone this time." "I was warned," she said, nodding toward Lyra. "Also, Gronk bit me once." "I got the message." The actual ceremony was short. Valerian rites didn't require vows, only contact, hands pressed, foreheads aligned, hearts measured, in sync through microfield resonance. The onboard AI played a song composed from their combined neural patterns, a blend of Theo's scattered melodies and Lyra's calm, crystalline focus. Theo couldn't understand it logically, but it made his chest feel like sunlight at the end. Lyra looked at him and said, "Now the bond is chosen." He smiled. "You know, when I first said it, I didn't think I meant it." "I know," she replied. "That is why I waited for when you did." Gronk, seated proudly on a hover pedestal between them, projected fireworks in a short montage of Theo falling over things. After the ceremony, the assembly presented them with a gift, joint command of Concordia on its maiden voyage. A year of exploration beyond the known systems, observation, diplomacy, peace-building, an excellent opportunity to test the long-term viability of emotional compromise in confined space, Hallie noted. And also whether two people who share everything can survive each other's sleep patterns. Theo leaned back in the command chair. "I snore like someone negotiating with reality." She hums battle chants in her sleep. "We'll be fine." The ship launched to cheers and glittering magnetic flares. As they cleared orbit, Theo looked out at the stars, not as something unreachable, but as something that finally felt like home. Later, in their shared quarters, he sat beside Lyra, watching their trajectory adjust toward an uncharted sector, marked only as Velum 23. Somewhere out there was a planet made entirely of crystalline fungi. Somewhere else, a cloud of intelligent gas, debating theology with passing comets. I used to be afraid of permanence, he said, like if something lasted, it would trap me. Lyra traced her finger along the viewport. And now it feels like we're building something with movement, not a cage, a ship. She turned to him. Then let us see how far it sails. Theo, grinned Captain and Bladewife. Not bad for a guy who once proposed by accident. Gronk burbled from his sleeping dock. Then, without prompting, he emitted a quiet phrase, his first actual word since bonding. Stay. Theo looked at Lyra. They both nodded. And for the first time since their strange, sideways journey began, neither one of them flinched. Cale Voss had never trusted public terminals, especially ones that sparked when you sneezed near them. He stared at the humming interface mounted on the docking concourse wall and debated whether the sixth cup of synthetic espresso was responsible for the low buzz in his teeth, or if this particular machine simply enjoyed flirting with electrocution. Please don't explode, he muttered, tapping the screen with all the confidence of a man who once got static shocked by a light switch and now blamed electricity for most of his problems. The terminal blinked, then sighed before flashing access denied. Cale sighed back, louder, as if competing for dramatic effect. Behind him, the bustling sprawl of Helix 4's main dock pulsed with the usual chaos, tired freighter captains arguing, with automated customs bots, vendors hawking overpriced authentic Martian snacks, suspiciously squid-like, and somewhere, someone yelling about luggage that had gained sentience and now refused to be carried. Cale rubbed his temples. He'd only come here for one reason, to deliver a maintenance patch for a security grid that, judging by the station's current display of glitchy holograms and flickering gravity, was clearly rejecting his efforts. That, and to pick up a replacement coffee grinder. Priorities. He turned from the stubborn terminal and almost collided with her, not in the dramatic, cinematic way that involved slow motion and background violins. More like he stepped forward, mumbled an apology, and then looked up into eyes that stopped time. Her face was unmistakably human, but her ears, long and delicate, tapered to subtle points that shimmered under the neon station lights. Maybe, or a particularly stylish genetic model with commitment issues. Her features were calm, composed, but her eyes held a storm. Like she'd already cried all the tears she was going to cry, and now stood there waiting for someone to explain why it was raining again. You promised, she said. Cale blinked. I did. You don't remember. I mean, he scratched the back of his neck. I don't not remember, Butoke. Yes, I don't remember. Her expression didn't change. That was worse than if she'd slapped him. I think there's been a mix-up, he offered. Maybe another Cale. It's not an uncommon name, you know. There's a Cale in logistics who No, he got eaten by a vending machine. Never mind, still nothing, just those eyes. Cale coughed. Do you, want to elaborate? You promised what exactly? Dinner. Freedom. Intergalactic karaoke night. A pause. Then she leaned in and said, softly, you said you wouldn't forget me. And just like that, his stomach did that thing it did whenever he realized he left the oven on back home on Europa 3. That cold, spiraling drop. Except this time, he didn't have an oven. Or a home on Europa 3. Or Europa 3. Okay, he said slowly. This is going to sound ridiculous, but did I know you from somewhere? You knew me in the place that doesn't, but exist anymore. Oh good, he said brightly. A metaphor. Behind them, a sanitation drone burst into flames. No one noticed. She turned and walked away. Cale hesitated for exactly 4 seconds, the time it took for his logical brain to scream, don't follow the mysterious woman who speaks in riddles, and then followed her. Because logic had never paid his rent, she moved fast, weaving through the crowd like someone who'd navigated Helix 4's absurdly complicated concourse maps before. Cale had been here 12 times and still ended up in the noodle court every time he searched for the medbay. By the time they reached a quieter docking platform labeled Sector C, restricted personnel only, Cale was winded and increasingly concerned. You realize this is a restricted zone, right? He said. There's a big red sign that says authorized crew only. Very aggressive font, very red. She didn't answer, just turned, stared and said, you're about to start remembering. I don't know if that's a good thing. Oh, excellent, Cale muttered. Always reassuring when someone says that with absolutely no context in a dimly lit corridor near a suspicious humming door. The door behind her slid open. Inside was a small shuttle, sleek, old alien. It looked like someone tried to design a luxury yacht and ended up building a praying mantis instead. Cale felt his stomach do another somersault. I'm not getting in that thing, he said. You got in last time. Okay, but last time I was clearly more adventurous and less cautious, possibly drunk. She stepped aside. Her face softened. For just a moment, there was no hurt, no mystery, just her. Her long ears twitched slightly at a station announcement, echoing through the dock, and the light caught her in a way that made Cale feel like he was staring into a memory he hadn't lived yet. I need your help, she said. Cale sighed. You have no idea how emotionally blackmail why that sounds when I don't know what's going on. You will. Do I have to sign anything? No. Is there food on the ship? No. Fine. He stepped inside the shuttle. sealed shut behind them with a hiss like the exhale of a sleeping god. Inside, it smelled like ozone, lavender, and faint existential dread. Cale slumped into a chair that felt far too ergonomic for comfort. "Well," he said, as she took the pilot seat, "at least tell me your name." She looked at him. Something unreadable flickered in her expression. "Lyrian," she said. And Cale Voss, man of poor decisions and worse memory, felt something shift inside his chest like a gear clicking into place in a machine that hadn't moved in years. "Okay, Lyrian," he said, voice quieter now. "Where are we going?" She smiled, just barely. "To remember what you promised." The shuttle made a sound somewhere between a purr and a sarcastic cough as it left Helix 4's orbit. Cale tried not to read too much into that. He'd always been suspicious of vehicles with personalities, with ones with more emotional range than his last two exes combined. The stars outside the viewport blurred into smears of light as Lyrian engaged some kind of faster-than-legal propulsion. Cale's seat vibrated like it had a personal grudge against his spine. He gripped the armrests and tried to focus on anything other than the subtle sensation that his molecules were trying to shake hands with one another. So he said loudly, over the hum of the engine, "Do I at least get a pamphlet?" Something like, "So you've been abducted by a mysterious elven-eared woman claiming you're destined to save the galaxy." Lyrian didn't turn. She was focused on the controls gestures that looked part dance, part programming ritual. Her hands slid through semi-solid holograms that shimmered in alien glyphs. Cale was 80% sure she had no idea what a pamphlet was. "Okay," he continued, trying to drown the silence with banter. "Quick survey. On a scale of 1 to total brain wipe, how much of my memory is missing?" She finally glanced at him. "You volunteered to forget." Cale blinked. "Right, that does sound like something I'd do. Future me must have really trusted you." "No," she said softly. "You trusted yourself." Cale frowned, leaning forward. "Okay, but did I at least write myself a note?" A sticky hollow post-it. "Dear future me, please ignore the panic and follow the elven space goddess. Love, your smarter self." Her mouth twitched at the corner. Not quite a smile, but definitely a subtle agreement that he was an idiot with charm. Cale relaxed a little. He could work with that. He glanced around the cockpit. It was compact, alien, and slightly asymmetrical in a way that made his inner neat freak itch. Strange metallic tendrils curled from the walls like vines, pulsating with bioluminescent veins. At the center of the console, a crystal hovered midair, rotating slowly and casting blue light across Lyrian's cheekbones. "I feel like I'm inside a very expensive decorative egg," he said. "It's called a Lutherie shellship," she replied, grown, not built. "Of course it is," he said. "Can it make coffee?" "No." "Then I regret everything." They flew in silence for a while, an odd, peaceful silence, like the kind between heartbeats. Cale stared at the stars, at their eerie calm. His brain, however, was doing cartwheels behind his eyes. A part of him wanted to scream that this was madness, that he was Cale Voss, certified IT disaster manager, not a hero, and he should probably be back on Helix 4, eating undercooked noodles and yelling at printers. But another part remembered, not clearly, just flashes the scent of burning cinnamon. Laughter in a tunnel of gold light. Her hand, Lyrian's, gripping his in a moment of something urgent, and the color blue, like it meant something. Something holy. He leaned back. "This is the part where I usually have a panic attack, but it's hard to panic when your seat's massaging your lumbar." "Just saying." Lyrian didn't laugh, but her ears twitched. He took that as a win. "So what exactly did I promise?" he asked, quieter this time. She hesitated. That was new. She hadn't hesitated before. Not when speaking cryptically. Not when dragging him onto her time-bending bug ship. Not even when accusing him of betrayal. "You promised," she said, "to carry the code." Cale blinked. "I carry the code like a USB stick. Or do you mean that metaphorically?" "Please say metaphorically. I don't have the body for being a sacred relic." "You agreed to embed a fragment of the Continuum Protocol inside your consciousness. It was the only safe place." "That sounds extremely irresponsible." "Who let me agree to that?" "You did, and you were sober," Cale groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Do I at least get cool powers?" "No." "Well, this is going terribly." She turned toward him now, finally meeting his gaze. Her expression was no longer stormy, just ... tired. The protocol was collapsing. Every faction wanted a copy. Governments, syndicates, even time cults. "We didn't know who to trust. You said, 'Trust me,' offered your mind as sanctuary." Cale stared at her. "That does not sound like a man who thinks things through. You said, 'I'd rather forget you and live, than remember and die with everyone else.'" That shut him up. Lyrian turned back to the console. "We're almost there. We're the archive." Of course it was called the archive. Cale could already imagine the place. Glowing monoliths, robed librarians, echoing halls where silence was enforced by ancient anti-noise fields and probably laser cats. Still, he felt a shiver of anticipation. Memory or not, his bones knew they were heading somewhere important. "Do they have chairs?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "One, and it doesn't like being sat on." He sighed. "Why can't anything in this galaxy be normal?" As the stars twisted and folded around them, Cale closed his eyes and whispered under his breath, "Dear past me, you idiot. I hope you know what you're doing." And somewhere in the corner of his mind, buried deep under static and fog, a voice not his own answered faintly, "I do." The archive loomed like a riddle someone forgot to finish. From a distance it looked less like a structure and more like an indecisive black hole that had considered swallowing a planet, then got bored halfway through and settled on becoming a monument to anxiety instead. It hung in space with no apparent propulsion, orientation, or allegiance to logic, which, Cale reasoned, was probably a requirement for any place claiming to hold memories. The Lu-3 shell ship pulsed once and disengaged silently from faster-than-light drift. Cale's stomach caught up with him half a second later, filed a complaint, and settled into a polite simmer of nausea. "I hate when space bends around me," he muttered. "I feel like a noodle in philosophical soup." Lyrian touched the control, the sphere, and the ship began to hum a low resonant tone that Cale felt in his molars. "They're scanning us," she said. "For what? Guns, secrets, fashion crimes, your consciousness." Cale sat up straighter. "Wait, they can do that from here. They built the system that lets consciousness be carried across vessels in the first place. So, they're the reason. I'm currently a walking brain vault with no access credentials." She nodded. "Fantastic. I'm going to get judged by a library." The ship halted just outside the perimeter of the archive's field, a boundary visible only by the way the stars refracted around it, like they'd been nudged aside by a cosmic librarian saying, "She." A moment passed, then another, and then, with the elegance of a whale exhaling in slow motion, a seam appeared in the archive's surface, a doorway, if one could call a yawning, spinning iris of light a door. Cale unbuckled his harness, glanced at Lyrian, and tried to muster the kind of confidence he usually reserved for pretending he'd read the terms and conditions. "Right," he said. "Let's go make friends with the interdimensional Dewey Decimal System." They disembarked into silence. The interior of the archive was not made of matter as Cale understood it. The walls didn't exist so much as suggest themselves. Shapes folded and unfolded like thoughts trying to remember themselves. And in the center of the vast chamber stood something that could loosely be called a being, though it looked like someone had handed a child a box of mirrors and told them to design an elder god. It flickered in and out of different forms: a tree of copper roots, a swarm of feathers, a floating stone with too many shadows. Cale stared, then waved. "Hi, I'm Cale. This is Lyrian. We come in peace and mild confusion." The entity pulsed. Lyrian stepped forward. "We seek access to the sealed memory shard, under directive continuum or pulsing." Then a voice filled the chamber, not sound, but sensation, like someone humming logic directly into your brain. "The carrier is degraded." Cale raised a hand. "Rude. I'm right here," and I showered. "Memetic fragmentation at 39%. Recall functions damaged. Self-integrity in doubt." Lyrian's shoulders tensed. "Can the memory be restored?" A pause. "The kind that made galaxies nervous, yes. If the host permits. And if the maze is survived." Cale made a face. "Maze? What kind of weight? Please don't say it's metaphorical. Or worse, philosophical. Initiating retrieval maze. Please keep your limbs and moral frameworks inside the pathway at all times." Before Cale could protest, the floor dropped. Away he fell, screaming like a man who'd never had the chance to properly update his will. He landed gently somehow on what appeared to be a bridge made of light. Beneath it, oceans of thought churned. Above it, impossible architecture folded like origami under pressure. And in front of him, the path split into 3 shimmering corridors, each marked by a memory he didn't recognize but somehow knew belonged to him. To his left, a small room, with 2 cups of something steaming and blue, laughter echoing from behind a curtain. To his right, a sterile chamber, his own face reflected in a visor, voice trembling as he whispered, "I'll come back, I swear." And ahead, darkness, pure and waiting. Cale turned as Lyrian appeared beside him, floating down as if gravity respected her more than him. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm supposed to walk into one of these, aren't I?" he said. She nodded. "The path to remembering is ... curated. You'll face what you gave up and what you took." "Fantastic. Sounds like a holiday with my extended family." He stepped forward, chose the center path because of course he didn't, walked into the darkness. Inside, the air buzzed like an old song half remembered. Images flickered on the periphery of his vision. Starfields he didn't recognize but felt homesick for, voices laughing in a language that tickled the back of his tongue. And then her, not Lyrian, but a version of her, younger, wounded, standing at the edge of a burning sky. "You're late," she said, arms crossed. Cale's breath caught. He didn't know this moment, but something in him did. Something very old, very guilty. "I got delayed," he said. "You said you'd come back, that the code wouldn't change you." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words didn't feel like the right currency here. "I forgot you," he said finally. "But I think I remember the part where I hated myself for it." She stepped closer. Her hand touched his chest, and he felt the weight of promises made under collapsing stars. "You were supposed to carry hope," she whispered, "not just data." Kale swallowed hard. I think I dropped both. Then find them again, she said. Before it's too late, she vanished. The path blinked out and Kale woke up gasping in the center of the archive, the entity pulsing above him. Like a disapproving screensaver, Lyrian knelt beside him. You saw it? Yeah, Kale panted. I think I found my guilt. It's been doing push-ups. The entity VIBRATED. Memory shard restored to partial integrity. Host capable of protocol reinstatement. Kale sat up. Great. Now what? Lyrian helped him stand. Now, she said. We run before the protocol wakes up completely, because once it does, everyone else will want what's in my head. She nodded. Kale groaned. I really wish I had amnesia again. The archive didn't like letting people go. That much was clear from the way the exit corridor tried to fold itself into a Mobius strip as Kale and Lyrian sprinted toward the docking bay. The walls pulsed with what he could only describe as anxious geometry, and every now and then the floor made a deliberate effort to not be where it was 5 seconds ago. This is a very passive-aggressive library, Kale said, ducking as a ceiling panel twisted into a knot of light above them. Reminds me of my first apartment. Kept trying to turn into a mold habitat. Keep running, Lyrian said, leaping over a flickering crack in the floor that was either a dimensional fissure or a really angry shadow on it, he said, nearly tripping. Just so we're clear, this is your version of a successful memory recovery. We're still alive, aren't we? Only technically. Behind them, the archive entity's voice echoed again, less like speech and more like a migraine learning to sing. Unauthorized retrieval detected. Containment protocols activated. Please enjoy your last few seconds of free will. Charming, Kale muttered, skidding around a corner. If I die, I want it known that I did not enjoy my last few seconds of free will. Lyrian reached the shell ship first, slamming her palm onto the access node. The vessel responded with a chime and what Kale swore was a disapproving sigh. He threw himself inside just as the corridor behind them bent into a corkscrew of impossible angles. The hatch sealed. The moment they were in motion, Kale flopped onto the floor, gasping. Okay, update me. What just happened, and how long do I have before my brain explodes? Lyrian slid into the pilot seat. The protocol is reawakening. That fragment we unlocked, it was dormant. Now it's broadcasting. Kale sat up slowly. Broadcasting. When she glanced at him. You, me. Your mind holds a signature now, a pattern that leads to the rest of the code. It feels like something that should come with a helmet. It came with amnesia. Great. Can I exchange it for store credit? The ship curved away from the archive, entering a corridor of space so narrow it shouldn't have existed. Stars bent like reeds around them. Kale watched the strange dance of gravity outside and tried to suppress the urge to ask if the walls were supposed to groan like that. So who's going to come looking for me? He asked. The ones who want the protocol. The ones who want to destroy it. And the ones who just want to dissect you for fun. Perfect. That's 3 new entries for my anxiety bingo card. Lyrian glanced back at him, her face unreadable. There's someone else too. Someone we both forgot. Is that supposed to be cryptic or just depressing? We'll know when she finds us. Kale didn't respond, not because he didn't want to, but because something was moving in his mind again. Not a memory, exactly. A rhythm, a code unfolding itself like a song he hadn't realized was stuck in his head. He blinked. Lyrian, he said, did you ever tell me what the protocol actually does? She hesitated. Not entirely. He raised a brow. And now would be a bad time to fill me in, I suppose. She hesitated longer. It's not just data, it's a pattern, a recursive consciousness framework designed to adapt across timelines. It's alive. In a way it learns, evolves. Kale paled. Wait, I've got a thinking computer program in my head. Not a program, a potential. Great. So I'm a walking hypothetical. She turned to face him. You're a seed. One version of a you somewhere chose to carry it. That version may have died. You may have branched. You may be the last one still capable of rebooting the whole structure. He leaned back. Okay, so we've got a sentient time-warping idea in my skull. That explains the dreams about screaming. Chairs. Lyrian didn't laugh. She looked tired, older. Kale reached into his coat pocket, fished out a half-melted protein bar and offered it to her. Here, it's coconut-flavored existential dread. She took it with the faintest smile. The ship beeped. Kale froze. That's not the good kind of beep, is it? No, Lyrian said. That's a proximity warning. From what? The viewports darkened. Something was approaching, a sleek vessel, black as spilled ink, moving without propulsion. It shimmered in and out of visibility like it was only half committed to being in this dimension. Kale squinted. Friend of yours? No, she said. That's M2. Sounds like a tax agency. Worse, multi-temporal enforcement unit. They think you're a threat to causality. I mean, they're not wrong. I once made a paradox sandwich by dating my own ex's alternate timeline clone. But this seems a little extreme. The ship fired a bolt of white light. The shell ship jolted violently. Kale was flung into the wall, with an oof that somehow managed to sound both surprised and offended. Lyrian yanked the controls. The ship dove, twisting through folds of space that responded like soap bubbles under a hairdryer. Kale clawed his way back into his seat. We can't outrun them forever, she said. Can we confuse them? How? I dunno. Release decoys. Jettison something shiny. Lie about our identities. Tell them I'm a very large sea cucumber with excellent hacking skills. She paused. We do have a mirror cloak prototype. Why wasn't that plan A? She activated it. The ship shimmered and vanished. Cale held his breath as the pursuing vessel drifted past, sensors scanning blindly. A full minute passed before Lyrian exhaled. They're gone, for now. Cale slumped again. So, still want to say this was a good idea? She looked at him, made the decision to carry the protocol. I only brought you back to that choice. Well, he said. Future me was clearly an overachieving lunatic. She tilted her head. You were also kind. Cale blinked. Oh, thanks. Lyrian turned back to the controls. Don't thank me yet. The ship moved into deeper space, away from known maps. The stars outside shimmered strangely, like they knew secrets and were very smug about it. Cale closed his eyes. In the distance, something stirred inside him. A memory. A voice, and then clearer than anything he'd heard in weeks, it said, "You promised." He sat upright. Lyrian, he said slowly. I think someone else just woke up. The voice in Cale's head didn't speak again. Not exactly. It sort of hummed a low, knowing vibration under his thoughts, like someone rearranging furniture in the attic of his brain. Every now and then it whispered a phrase, but never in any language Cale consciously recognized. Still, the meaning somehow slipped through. They're coming for the fracture. You're the pattern's echo. You were never alone, which was encouraging. If you enjoyed being haunted by cryptic support slogans from the universe's most passive-aggressive operating system. Cale sat cross-legged in the back of the ship, chewing on a nutrient stick that proudly advertised itself as almost like real cheese, and tasted like a dare. Lyrian hadn't spoken much since the M2 incident, which was slightly unnerving. She was at the helm, scanning for alternate routes, or possibly brooding in a dramatic and aesthetically pleasing manner. So Cale said halfway through a bite, on a scale of 1 to ancient-god-with-Wi-Fi-access, how worried should I be about this new presence in my head? She glanced back. It's not a presence. It's a resonance. Great. So I'm a tuning fork now. Can I also get a business card that says sentient protocol host and amnesiac life coach? She didn't answer, which Cale took as permission to continue spiraling conversationally. I'm flattered, really. Who wouldn't want to be the fragile meat container for a cosmic bootstrap program that might reboot the timeline and or get me vaporized? Lyrian finally turned. Do you want to stop? Cale blinked. Stop. What? Carrying it. Running. Trying. He looked at her. Really looked this time. Her eyes weren't cold or steely, just ... Tired. Tired like someone who remembered every version of a goodbye. He set the half-eaten stick down. No, I just want to understand what I'm carrying, and why it keeps whispering like a motivational ghost. She nodded once. That at least I can help with. She rose from her seat, walked to the rear of the ship, and pressed her hand to the wall. A segment peeled back, revealing a small chamber lined with bioluminescent thread. Cale followed her in, where the air smelled faintly of ozone and cinnamon. This is the imprint vault, she said. It's not memory storage, it's memory resonance. We can trigger Echo's emotional recordings that survived the seal. Cale raised a brow. So like watching my own sci-fi therapy session. She stepped aside. Something like that. Cale moved to the center, unsure whether to sit, stand, or do interpretive dance. Before he could ask, the walls shimmered. Then, soundlessly, the room filled with a projection, not holographic, not visual, more like being dropped into the middle of a memory already in progress. He was laughing, not him now, an earlier Cale, eyes brighter, hair less frazzled. He stood on a windswept plateau under twin moons, barefoot, grinning like he'd just cheated death and got a kiss for his trouble. Across from him stood Lyrian, also smiling, almost shyly. Why me? He asked. She tilted her head. Because you saw it, the pattern, you recognized it. You mean the pretty shapes? No, the choice. The memory shimmered, shifted. Now they were inside a derelict ship, the air thick with smoke and failing gravity. She was injured. He was holding her hand, voice low and desperate. I'm going to take it, all of it. You hear me? No one else gets to bear this. You won't remember, I know. You'll lose me. He kissed her forehead. If it means you live, I'll find you again. The memory dissolved. Cale staggered back, breath caught in his throat. I said that. Lyrian nodded. I was. Very dramatic. You meant every word. He laughed weakly. Yeah, I can see why you dragged me out of its obscurity. The ship jolted. Not a weapon strike, something subtler. The lights flickered. The hum of the engine warbled. Lyrian dashed to the console. We're caught in a filament field. Cale frowned. That sounds like something that should be on a sweater. More like an interdimensional spiderweb. Oh, much worse. Outside, the view warped. Threads of pale energy webbed across the stars, tangling light itself. The ship began to slow, struggling as if running through syrup. Lyrian hissed. This wasn't supposed to be here. Define this. Please tell me it's not sentient. A voice rang out across the comms, silken, amused. Cale Voss, it said. Still running. Still wearing borrowed promises. Cale blinked. I know that voice. The screen flickered on a woman, not Ellerin, not human, something in between. Elegant, cruel, ears curved like crescents, and eyes that saw straight through time. Lyrian stiffened. Zelra smiled. Hello, sister. Kale's jaw dropped. Why do you have a sister? Why does she look like she flosses with cosmic string and drinks despair lattes? Zelra laughed. Oh, he still has the jokes. I do miss that. Lyrian stepped forward. What do you want? I want what he carries, what you locked away. The seed, the code, the final chorus. Not happening. Kale raised a hand. Okay, can we all agree I should get a say in this? I mean, I'm the one whose brain is apparently a very stylish USB stick. Zelra's eyes sparkled, of course. But your say is predictable. The web pulsed. Kale felt something in his mind recoil. Not fear, recognition. She's part of it, he whispered. Lyrian didn't look away. She tried to reshape the protocol. Bend it, control it. Zelra leaned in. And it worked, little sister. Until your Kale here decided to make a noble sacrifice. Kale pointed. Don't you quote me in your tone, lady. Zelra laughed again. Then the screen cut. The ship groaned. Lights dimmed. She's pulling us in. Lyrian muttered. We need to. Kale's eyes widened. Wait, I remember something. She didn't just want the protocol. She inserted something in it. Lyrian turned. What? A loop, a recursive emotional failsafe. Every time the protocol tried to bond with someone, it broke them. She went pale. That's how they lost the others. I don't think I broke, Kale said quietly, but I think I bent. The ship shuddered. Outside Zelra's vessel grew clearer, massive, elegant, coiled like a serpent made of starlight and malice. Kale looked at Lyrian. We've got one shot, right? She nodded. The memory shard, if we can realign it. We might wake the core. Kale smiled grimly. Well, time to see what future me was planning all along. He stood, touched the wall, and felt the protocol stir, no longer a whisper, but a rising song. And this time it was singing with him. The protocol's hum had changed. Kale felt it even before the lights shifted deeper, denser, like someone was tuning his nervous system to a new frequency. The song wasn't just inside his head anymore. It was moving through the ship, threading into the hull, wrapping itself around every surface like ivy spun from meaning and memory. Lyrian's hands danced across the interface, summoning a matrix Kale couldn't begin to interpret. Shapes unfolded in layers, colors that had no name but stirred a nostalgic ache behind his ribs. It's responding, she said. Kale nodded, jaw tight. Yeah, and it's getting weird in here. Even by space magic memory. USB standards, the filament field tightened. Outside the viewport, Zelra's vessel bloomed, unfurling like a flower engineered by someone who had once loved geometry and then betrayed it for fun. The tendrils that extended from her ship weren't just mechanical, they were partially alive, twitching and pulsing like nerves stretched across reality. I'm detecting displacement anomalies, Lyrian muttered. Translation, Kale asked. She's threading into nearby timelines, trying to splice us out. Splice us out. That sounds deeply unfriendly. She's looking for versions of you that are weaker ones. She can pull forward and overwrite you with. Kale grimaced. Okay, that's horrifying. I didn't even know I came in alternate flavors. The ship jolted as one of the timeline tendrils scraped against their hull, reality bending inward like a curtain caught in the wind. For a moment, Kale saw a flash himself, older, colder, wearing some kind of uniform with a sigil he didn't recognize. I just saw another me, he said. He looked like a villain in a very niche dystopia. She's reaching, Lyrian said. The protocol is resisting, but not fast enough. We need to access the core. Kale turned toward the resonance vault again. It pulsed faintly, like it knew he was coming back. All right, he said. Let's wake it. He placed his hands on the vault's interface, which was now less a console and more a shimmering membrane of intent. As he connected, the ship blurred away, his vision filled with cascading light. No corridors, no walls, just code. Endless living, spiraling code. The protocol welcomed him. Welcome, Kale Voss, carrier confirmed. Identity match, 92.4% stability. Mimetic anchor located. Heart signature verified. I'm not here for formalities, he muttered. Just tell me what I left myself. The protocol pulsed. You left this. The cascade parted. A scene unfolded. He was there again, his past self, sitting across from Lyrian in a room made of crystal and stars. Both looked exhausted, frayed at the edges of being. This won't hold, she said. I know, Pascal replied, but it'll buy time and you'll get me back. You don't believe that? He smiled sadly. No. But I believe in you. Then he reached into his own chest, not physically, not quite, and pulled something out, a thread of light, tangled and trembling. This is all I can carry. The rest has to be buried. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Then I'll dig. Present Kale watched, stunned. That's it. That was the plan. No, the protocol replied. That was the seed. The root decision. The structure grew beyond it. Would you like to see the full map? He hesitated. Will it make my head explode? Unclear. Well, that's encouraging. Still, he braced himself. Do it. The protocol unfurled. It wasn't a plan, it was a garden. Possibilities spiraled outward like vines, alliances forged and broken. alternate Kales who turned to violence, versions of Lyrian who vanished into starlight, each branch marked by a choice, a divergence, a cost dot, and at the center a path narrow, winding, painful. One version of himself had chosen it. The version that had loved, the version that had forgotten, the version that had, inexplicably, survived. You were never chosen, the protocol said. You were grown. Kale swallowed hard. What do I do now? You complete the choice. His eyes flew open. Lyrian was calling his name, shaking his shoulder. She's breaking through, she said. Zelra's reaching in. You've got seconds. Kale stood. Then we give her what she wants. What? He stepped toward the front of the ship, hands raised. Open a channel. You're not serious. I'm always serious when I'm terrified. The comlink activated. Zelra appeared, smug and graceful, decided to surrender. She purred. Absolutely, Kale said, in the most unhelpful way possible. He raised his palm and the protocol activated. A shockwave of living data erupted from him, coded threads of light spiraling outward. Zelra's ship reeled. The filament field snapped like old string. Her image distorted. What is this? She snarled. Call it a resonance flare, Kale said. Call it me remembering what I promised. Zelra's expression twisted. Her ship shrieked through the feedback mixed with something that almost sounded like fear. Kale turned to Lyrian. Now she slammed the controls. The shell ship plunged into fold space, the protocol singing like a chorus inside them. Zelra vanished behind them, cut off. Screaming, they dropped into silence. The ship drifted. No alarms, no pursuit, just the stars again, wide and still. Kale exhaled. Well, he said, that was dramatic. Think I earned a snack? Lyrian chuckled. Just once. Then she looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You really don't remember the last thing you said to me, do you? Kale shook his head. She hesitated. You said, when I forget you. Remind me too. Laugh. Kale looked down. Did I? She nodded. He smiled. Just a little. You're doing a good job. Kale woke up to the sound of the ship's coffee synthesizer making a noise that could only be described as deeply resentful. You're not even a real appliance, he muttered, prying himself off the floor where he'd fallen asleep mid-debug session. You don't get to have opinions. The synthesizer responded by spitting a stream of steam at his ankles. Lyrian sat across from him, arms folded, watching this domestic breakdown with the serene detachment of someone who had spent their formative years aboard a living vessel that could fold space like origami. You still think it likes you? She asked. I'm building rapport, Kale replied, standing up and shaking his leg like the steam had left emotional damage. It's a slow process, like taming a wild animal. Or programming with deprecated libraries. She gestured to the console behind him. We've got incoming, Kale groaned, rubbing his face. Please tell me it's not Zelra again or a version of me with a goatee. Worse, Lyrian said. It's Dr. Essa. Kale blinked. Wait, that's not worse. That's Utwe. Is that the memory architect who first helped seal the protocol? He was eccentric then. Apparently now he's an independent neural contractor with a ship full of toast. Toast, you'll see. The incoming vessel blinked into existence outside their viewport, looking like a giant copper jellyfish that had collided with a steampunk opera house. Kale squinted. Why does it have chimney stacks? In space, Lyrian just sighed. Brace yourself. The communication channel opened automatically, and a hologram of Dr. Essa materialized in the center of the cabin. He wore what could only be described as a bathrobe lined with circuit diagrams and a colander on his head. Ah, Kale Voss. Essa beamed. My favorite scrambled consciousness. You're looking more molecularly cohesive than I expected. Thanks, Kale said, and you're definitely still doing your thing. I see the protocol didn't cause spontaneous limb duplication. That's a win. Isar leaned toward the camera, then held up a slice of what looked suspiciously like burnt bread. Toast. No thank you. Suit yourself. It improves signal fidelity. Kale turned to Lyrian. Does it? No, she said flatly. Esser clapped his hands. Let's get to the meat of the neuron. You're here because you're internal. Protocol has reached partial resonance, correct? Kale nodded. I accidentally weaponized it, temporarily. No one died. Probably. Isar's eyes gleamed. Splendid. Time to check the harmonic integrity of your mnemonic interface. Stand still, and don't think about flying cows. Why would I? The scanner beam hit him mid-sentence, and a series of images flashed. Behind his eyelids a birthday party he never had. A blue field of fireflowers, a version of Lyrian crying on a bridge made of data. When it stopped, Kale swayed slightly. Okay, that was like being sneezed on by history. ESR frowned. There's a fracture. Kale steadied himself. Oh good, because everything else has been going so smoothly. The memory you accessed to trigger the protocol flare was a surface echo, Izor said. There's a deeper vault. One you sealed yourself, behind a neural paradox. It's the failsafe. Kale blinked. I gave myself a backdoor memory. Technically, Izar said, you gave yourself a memory that erases itself whenever you think about remembering it. Kale blinked again. That sounds like something I would do after 3 cups of logic wine and a dare. You were, in fact, drunk. Lyrian confirmed. ESSAR adjusted his colander. If you want access to the full protocol, every layer, every version you have to enter the paradox field, will hold the anchor line here. Kale looked between them. So I have to go into my own mind and wrestle a memory that doesn't want to exist. Yes, Yasar said brightly. And try not to become unobservable in the process. That's messy. Great, can I at least bring snacks? Only metaphysical ones, Yasar replied. Kale stepped into the resonance vault again. It welcomed him now, like an old friend who hadn't stopped judging him since college. He took a deep breath and let the protocol guide him inward. He dropped into the paradox. There was no gravity, no time, just a loop, a memory playing itself again and again. Kale stood in a corridor of light, watching himself from behind. Every time he called out, the version ahead of him vanished. Every time he moved forward, the corridor reset. He sat down. Okay, he muttered. You're trying to remember something you promised yourself not to remember, which means I can't chase it directly. He looked at his feet. The floor shimmered. He thought of a joke. A really dumb one. One he'd made to Lyrian the day before they sealed the protocol. Why did the subatomic particle get pulled over? Because it had too much mass on its record. He laughed out loud. The corridor cracked. The loop shivered. Then it changed. Now he stood before a sealed chamber, a door that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kale stepped forward. Inside was a message. From him: if you're reading this, then everything went wrong. But you're still here. That means you chose hope. So listen carefully. You didn't promise to save the galaxy. You didn't promise to protect the code. You promised to find her again and to let her remind you of who you are. Kale stared. The chamber collapsed. And he woke up. Lyrian was holding his shoulder. You were out for a minute. He looked at her. Something behind his eyes had shifted. I remember, he said. Everything. He nodded slowly. Not all the details. But, the promise. Yeah, I remember that. Lyrian didn't speak. She just looked at him, eyes shimmering. Kale reached out and took her hand, and the protocol, inside him, pulsed once like it was smiling too. Kale found himself standing in a place that technically didn't exist. The protocol, now fully awake within him, had created a projection space-neutral harmonic, oddly cozy, somewhere between a childhood blanket fort and a hyper-intelligent waiting room. The walls shifted gently between colors. His brain was still negotiating how to process. The air smelled like warmth, memory, and coffee that remembered being coffee. In a better life, across from him stood Zelra, or a version of her. No weapons, no malice, just ... Her looking very annoyed to be inside what she referred to as a thought bubble designed by a man. Did you really program a consciousness vault with sarcastic furniture? She asked, gesturing at the armchair next to her. It had arms, literal arms. One of them was waving. I didn't program it, Kale replied, flopping into a beanbag that adjusted itself with a sigh. I just set the tone. The protocol did the rest. Apparently, my subconscious has a sense of humor. Sorry, it doesn't match your ominous aesthetic. Zelra crossed her arms. Why did you pull me here? Because I figured before we finished wrecking space-time, maybe we could try an old-fashioned conversation. No weapons, no monologues. Just two people with weird ears and control issues. Her brow twitched. You think this is going to end in peace? I think it has to. She studied him. You've changed. Yeah, Kale said. Turns out, carrying a sentient legacy of civilization and recovering fragmented memories of a possibly romantic, definitely traumatic interdimensional relationship does things to a person. He leaned forward. Zelra, this protocol. It doesn't belong to one person. It's not a weapon, it's not a throne, it's a tuning fork. It finds resonance between people, between timelines, and when you try to twist it into something personal, it pushes back hard. She rolled her eyes. Spare me the poetry. You can't convince me this ends with everyone holding hands and singing. No, but maybe it ends with you letting go before it destroys you. Zelra's gaze flickered. It rejected you, didn't it? He said gently. That's why you started fracturing times. You thought, if you could find a version of yourself that the protocol accepted, you'd win by proxy. She didn't answer. He stood. You don't have to prove anything. Not to it. Not to Lyrian. Not even to me. Zelra looked away. I didn't want it to end this way. It doesn't have to, Kale said. We can stabilize it. Together you help me rebalance the broadcast structure, reroute the resonance chain, and maybe, just maybe, we don't all dissolve into temporal pudding. She stared at him. You're offering me redemption. I'm offering you a job. She blinked. He grinned. Head of security for the protocol core. Full access, cool uniform, occasional ethical debates with an ancient AI that may or may not dream about pizza. Zelra's mouth quirked. Just slightly. You're insufferable, and you're not denying it's a good offer. She hesitated, then extended a hand. On one condition. Name it. No more beanbags. Done. They shook out the moment, cracked like ice. Kale opened his eyes back aboard the shell ship. Lyrian was there, watching him, arms folded and expression wary. Did it work? She asked. He nodded. She's rethinking things. Might take up HR in the metaphysical afterlife department. Lyrian's expression softened. I didn't think you'd come back. He smiled at her. You did. They stood in silence. For a moment. The kind that isn't empty. Just full of things too important to rush. I remember all of it now, he said. The promises. The versions of me that didn't make it. The version of you I kept chasing. And I think, he said slowly, Every version was trying to be worthy of you. Lyrian stepped closer. That's not how it works. You never had to earn me, Kale. You just had to be you. Even this version, he asked. The one with memory gaps and questionable hair choices. She smiled, especially that one. They didn't kiss. Not yet. It wasn't that kind of story. But they almost did. Instead, they worked together. They restructured the protocol's broadcast lattice, rewrote corrupted resonance points, balanced the harmonic equations that dictated how memories echoed across timelines. It wasn't glamorous. It involved a lot of technical jargon, recursive math, and one incident involving a sentient spreadsheet that tried to unionize. But it worked. The protocol stabilized. The fractures began to close, one by one. Alternate versions of Kale memories, projections, echoes dissolved into the core, leaving behind a singular pattern. A man who had chosen love, and then forgotten it, and then chosen it again. That was the story the protocol would carry forward. Not of war, not of conquest, but of remembering, and choosing. They left the shell ship docked in the folder-neutral space between dimensions, now serving as the new protocol core. Lyrian stayed as its guardian. Kale left not because he wanted to forget again, but because he didn't need to. He took with him a small crystal, a resonance shard, embedded with one memory, Lyrian's laughter. Just in case, he wandered the stars, offering help where it was needed, tech support where it wasn't, and existential advice to confused A's going through mid-cycle crises. Every so often someone would ask if he was that Kale Voss. And he'd smile, scratch his head and say, I get that a lot. Then he'd hum a tune no one else knew and the stars would hum back.